Hello, so today we're going to Tubbataha Reefs, which is in the Philippines, in the Sulu Sea, between Borneo and the Philippine islands of Palawan, the Visayas, the Zamboanga Peninsula, and it's in the middle of the ocean. And we saw amazing fish life. So this is example number one. These are some bumphead parrot fish. So these are very large parrot fish. The big ones are more than a meter long and they can weigh up to 40 kilos. And they travel in these groups, in these schools, so it's almost like a herd of buffaloes. And interestingly, there's a jackfish, which is a predatory fish, which is mingling with them. And the jackfish is basically using them as a hunting protection, as a hunting cover. Now, these fish are parrotfish, and the parrotfish are essentially specialized wrasses. They have these very powerful beaks, and what most parrotfish do, they feed on endolithic algae, meaning they crunch up coral rubber, and there are these very nutritious cyanobacteria in the coral rubber. And the bumphead parrotfish do that too, but they are among the few parrotfish which are so big and powerful that they can actually eat living corals. And you can see their beaks, these are powerful beaks. So these are algae eaters, but they are very different algae eaters from the surgeonfish, which are mainstay in the coral reef fish community. And the surgeonfish, they scrape these filamentous algae. Now here in the back you can see one of them pooping, and it's all sand which this one is pooping. And so these have a major impact on the reef. Now these are such big fish, and of course good eating, and they're relatively easy to catch, because once you get one you probably get the whole school. So in most parts of the Philippines, unfortunately, you will not see these majestic animals anymore. But in Tubbataha, where I had the chance to visit earlier this year, you have a very good chance of encountering one of these large groups. And you see these humps on the heads. So, the older the fish, the bigger the hump. And you can also see the very typical wrasse and parrotfish swimming style, which is all done by flapping the pectoral fins. So what a great experience to see these humphead parrotfish in Tubbataha. Now we saw some really interesting examples of fish behavior. So this is a fire dartfish, and why is it called a dartfish? Now let's look at what it does when it feels a little bit irritated or threatened by a diver. Oops! And here the same thing in slow motion. Now this here is a different species of dartfish, and they're showing a very similar behavior, but they're doing it in a group. So very fast escape reflexes. If you are a small fish, then the coral reef is a very dangerous place, and you better have some strategies. Now here is a tiny goby, and that's some unusual footage. Pay attention to the goby's back, and it took a poop. And now there's a lot of schooling of fishes. So here we have this red-toothed triggerfish, and there were just many thousands on the reef. And for some reason, maybe it's the type of food they need, but they did really well in Tubbataha Reefs. We saw countless of these fish. Very interesting example here. There's a Napoleon wrasse, and it's hunting jointly with a jackfish. So this is a strategy that's well known. Now we also got to dive the lagoon of Tubbataha, which was really fascinating. And this is a large red snapper, and I assume that this fish has probably never seen a human. So it was very curious what we are. In other places the fish swim away, but this one was checking us out. And it was checking us out really closely. So fascinating stuff. Fishes which are not used to divers, but which are not afraid and which are curious. Okay, so this is a school of surgeonfish. Why are there so many together? Well, they are mating. So, massive activity here. And this is, of course, also a good sign. Generally, in Tubbataha, the fish were not very bothered by divers. So they were continuing to do what they were doing. And, they didn't stop when divers arrived. But they did stop in this case when a jackfish arrived. Actually two, which were trying to eat them. And then the mating was put on hold. So, quite a prevalence of this predatory fish is also something which stands out. Everybody's favorite are these fang blennies, and these are actually quite formidable fishes. They're tiny, but they have these very pointy teeth. But this one decided to hide in this hole. And a very interesting behavior. This is a unicorn fish, and it's being cleaned by a cleaneress, and this is not the typical cleaneress. This is the bicolor cleaneress, which doesn't have cleaner stations, but it roams around. Now, the wress was quite persistent. What do we have here? Okay, so this is a Titan triggerfish, of course. And if you're familiar with my YouTube channel, you've probably seen the viral video where this species of fish attacks me. This one was peaceful, but it was feeding either on corals or it was trying to, probably not, I think it was just taking apart this coral to get into some crabs or other shelled invertebrates in between. And there's another cleaner wrasse, and this again is the Dimidiatus, which is there are two of them. These are these small fishes which are playing around that fish, and they're actually parasite removers. So everybody wins. These cleaner wrasses get to eat, these thick, nutritious parasites, and the Titan triggerfish is not pesked by these parasites anymore. And there are lots of hanger-ons too. So there is this bluish elongated fish, which is a moon wrasse, and these wrasses, they are hoping that the Titan triggerfish, by means of its destructive action of the reef, will liberate something. So when the triggerfish gets a worm or a shell or a crab out, these wrasses will also go for that. So there are a couple of different species of wrasses, and I believe there's a hawkfish also watching that whole activity. So again, we have an example where that fish was feeding, happily feeding, and I was probably within less than 2 meters of the fish, and it didn't stop, it didn't swim away. So in Tubbataha, which is so well protected, the fish don't associate humans with spearfishers, with threats otherwise. So when there is an interesting fish behavior going on, and you approach carefully, you're not flailing around, you show good buoyancy, the fish will just continue doing what they're doing, which is fantastic. So not just are there many different species of fish which you can observe, but you will see a lot of fish behavior. And so the protection status of Tubbataha, which is really quite an achievement by the people at the National Park Office. This protection status is obvious not just in fish numbers and fish sizes and different species, but also how fish behave towards divers. Very noticeable. So now there is something stuck in this fish's mouth, and what a spectacle. So the reason why I went to Tubbataha this year is to participate in a survey of fish biodiversity, and at this point we have 520 species catalogued. So the whole reef is just a wonderland, and you see sharks. In many other places in the Philippines you don't see a lot of sharks anymore. Here's a white-tip reef shark circling, and I didn't see that, but other people in our group actually saw a tiger shark. So this is the second year in a row where I missed a tiger shark, but that's okay. As you probably know, my passion is not with the big fish but with the gobies. So there were lots of these. There were several species which we newly found this year, like this Trimanasa, tiny fish, and this is a Iviota goby, even tinier, less than a centimeter in length. And this here, of course, is Randall's shrimp goby, which to me is really the king of the shrimp gobies. So this is a fish which only lives in these balconies along steep walls, so you barely see that fish shallower than 20 meters. And then it's one of these gobies which shares a burrow with shrimp, and it's moving its dorsal fin like this, kind of like a pheasant, showing its feathers. So this is to show, I'm big and I'm here. Now, there were also interesting invertebrates in Tubbataha. This, of course, is a flatworm. There were not a lot of nudibranchs. I think this is probably because of the high current nature of this reef system, which is in the middle of the Sulu Sea. We saw this lovely giant clam in the lagoon, actually. So these giant clams are really depleted in many other parts of the Philippines. It's always heartwarming to see them.